Are we live? We're live. Happy. What day is it? Wednesday, besties and bosses. Oh my goodness. I got a new laptop over the weekend or a new computer, I guess, laptop. And I don't know if y'all know this every time. It's the same exact MacBook, but I have to do like all the resigning in updates. So it just took me forever to figure out how to get on here just because of the different logins and the different connecting the camera and things. So my brain just doesn't know what day of the week it is because clearly I cannot multitask or do more than one thing at a time. Anyway, very exciting to be on a new computer because I got a bigger screen. So I can see my clients bigger and I've got a updated camera. So very fun business gifts, fun tax write-off for the year. Anyway, let's center because we've got a fun conversation, fun, but also important conversation for what you need to know to close more five-figure deals. This is something that has come up for quite a few of my clients recently. It has made a really big difference in terms of not missing out on great clients that they actually thought were deals that were kind of dead in the water. So we're going to talk through that today. Before we do announcements, so last week I think I shared we were opening up consultations for SPY this month. That I'm very grateful. We had spots fill over the holidays, so there is, unless someone really wants to do an intensive in December, because I know we're kind of hitting the end of the year. I'm full, but we are opening. I believe I will have, there's some people I'm talking to in full transparency, but I believe we'll have one spot opening up in January. Definitely one, it looks like in February. And I'll open up an intensive in January as well. So if you're interested in working together, my spots have been booking very quickly. Yes, I have a large roster, but a lot of my clients renew and stay on. And I've been opening up a few more spots recently because I had capped my capacity. So we opened up my capacity a little. So we did have a couple of extra spots, but those have been staying full. So if you're interested in working together, please book a consultation. They are very non-pressured. I've had people tell me they're worth $1,000 alone because of the clarity you get from the call. I would love to connect with you and see if it's a fit, but also if you're looking for the next year, even if you're looking more for like March, April, I would recommend you book a call sooner rather than later so we can talk about when those spots are opening up because I don't know how much more openings will happen when. All right. That said, let's talk about what we need to know to close more five-figure deals. So the reason I want to have this conversation, it's a couple of reasons. First, I think it's just important for us to recognize that and just to normalize, if you are someone who sells high ticket offers, and you might also sell low ticket offers, this is not a conversation to say low ticket is dead, high ticket is where it's at, or high ticket is dead and low ticket's where it's at. That is just, I think that gets things really funny in business all of the time and has people make poor business decisions. And I don't think we want to be chasing the trends on that. And I think that can get a little noisy in our minds. And just to normalize, I have clients who sell high ticket and low ticket. I'm happy to support people with both. However, I think it is important for us to recognize when we're selling a high ticket offer, and generally a high ticket offer is going to be 4 to 5 or 6 figures. I have clients who sell all of the above. I have clients who sell high 6-figure offers. Usually, when that's the case, you're going to have you're going to be in the sales process more. When we're selling lower ticket offers, even when we're selling like lower high ticket offers, like a course that's a couple $1,000s, you might be involved in the launch, but usually you're less connected to the one-on-one connection with each salesperson. Maybe you're still having sales calls, but I know for a lot of my clients, even who have like a group program or a mastermind, some of them are still having calls, and I recommend that when someone's beginning their sales process and launching, but a lot of times it's their scaling, right? They're having fewer of those direct touch points. And generally speaking, again, this isn't the case for everything, but generally speaking, when we have a higher ticket, so 5-figure or more, we are generally involved in the sales process a little bit more personally. Let me know if this is making sense what I'm saying. And the reason I say this is because of that. What I find is some unique things can happen in the sales process that can make it feel really personal and can have us make what's going on really personal when it is not personal, and can unintentionally create or cause us for us to close the deal, meaning to shut it down instead of to close the deal to book the client or the sale. And I've supported clients who, recently I just had a client close a 15K deal. I have a client who has sold, it's a multi 6-figure deal. Don't actually know what the final amount is, but we're talking high multi 6 figures. I've had clients who have 25 to 50K coaching packages, and then again, high six-figure, multi-six-figure offers that they're closing. So this is something I really see quite a bit behind the scenes, and I think we forget how much of sales at this level, I mean, sales at every level, let's not kid ourselves. If you're launching a $37 product to the masses, there's still a lot of this involved. It just shows up in a different way. But what I think we often forget is how much, yes, the strategy is absolutely important, and looking at the data and refining your sales process, all of that matters so much. But what also matters is our thought process, how we're thinking, mindset essentially, how we're showing up as the CEO, our energy in terms of how we're interacting with people, but also how that is influencing the way we are responding to things like objections or to follow-ups. So that's what I want to dive into a little bit today, because there really are some key things that I see just make a huge difference that I've just seen recently for a couple of clients, again, where I think they would have not booked the client, and because of these seemingly small shifts really is what helped them to get great clients on their roster. I'm very dry today because of the heat, so excuse me, I'm going to probably drink a whole gallon of water while we're talking. So again, as I'm talking through this, if you have questions, if you want me to clarify anything, I want to make sure that this all makes sense and that you get value from this, because I really do think this is one of those, if you can understand this and land the plane on this, which I will, I've got hair in my mouth, I will hopefully do for you, I think it can make a really, really big difference in business. So what happened recently is two of my clients, one's a multi-six-figure client, one's a client who's scaling to their first 6 figures. This came up in two different ways, and one of my clients, she's making I think she's making about 15 to 20K months right now, consistently has for years. And the reason I say that is just for context, that this isn't someone who's brand new to business or sales, and because I think sometimes we think these sorts of things only come up for brand new to sales, and this is someone who's excellent at business, excellent at marketing, excellent at sales. It's just sometimes it's tough for us to see the forest for the trees in our own sales process and our own business. That's where coaching is invaluable, in my opinion. It's not always to teach us what we already know. It's to help us see the things we can't see. I always say I can't see the spinach in my own teeth or put my own mascara, right? I need a mirror and that support. And so we were talking about a couple of people that were in her sales pipeline. I put this in the email, and there was one or two in particular that she had written off based on what they had said to her as like they were just not going to hire her. And I reflected and said that I really saw things quite differently, and I thought that they were very interested, in fact, and I really encouraged her to follow up, and we had a conversation around how to follow up, and turns out she ended up booking that client. I'm having a conversation with another client, kind of a similar thing where something had been said in the sales process, and they were completely sure that this was a client who was like didn't even want to work with them. And I really saw things differently because I have a different vantage point, a different perspective. And I reflected to them what I saw. And I was like, I actually think this is an indication that they're really, really interested in working with you. Here's how I would recommend following up. And they ended up booking the client. And the reason for that is I think we have to remember a couple of things when it comes to sales. And I'm going to break this down a lot more, but I think just in overall, people's way of making decisions and buying and investing is more, it's both really simple and it's also more nuanced than it seems. I think so often we just think it's just going to follow this very linear, we do these things in our process and like that's it. And if someone doesn't pass go, right, we don't collect $200. If someone doesn't say yes initially, then we don't have the sale, and we just miss how nuanced humans are. And that at the end of the day, whether you're selling to a huge company or to an individual, we're always selling to humans, and so that makes it a nuanced process. And with that, what I see is it's really easy to miss out on really great clients who actually want to hire you and work with you, because we are also human and we have a tendency to bring our own personal shit into a sales process, and it can be very easy for us to project, to put our stuff onto a situation. And we'll break this down a little bit, and both of these I think can really cause us to miss out on really great clients, really great sales. So let's talk about that a little bit, and let me know, no one has to out themselves, but as I'm talking through this, if you want to share reflections, questions, if you've ever experienced this, please let me know. So let me just pull up my notes, because otherwise I will go off on tangents on this one, because I feel like I have a lot to say. So one of the things I reflected to this client, so this was both of these examples, and I think everybody's had this, were people who had quite a bit of objections and resistance, and just like what was coming up really made my client feel like they just didn't want to work with her. And the reason for that is it wasn't an initial yes, and they weren't indicating, I guess excitement maybe is the best way to say it. But what I was noticing is they were asking a lot of questions. They were, to me, they were giving a lot of buying cues. And what I noticed, and I think what happens for so much of us, I'm just trying to think of the best way to explain this so this will make sense for everybody, is two things are true. I think when someone has an objection or when someone is in an initial yes, or someone is still in the decision-making process, I think a couple of things can happen. I think first and foremost, what is our job is to really understand, and I've talked about this in so many different ways, is someone giving you a polite no because they don't have the tools or the wherewithal to tell you no? Or is someone saying, yes, I think this is what I want. I'm trying to figure out how to make this work. Here are my questions. Here are my objections. Here are my concerns. Here are my insecurities. Here's the stuff coming up for me that I need you to support me with so I can make this decision. And or is this someone who just definitely has a very different decision and buying making process than you do? What I see happen for most of us is if it's not an initial yes and someone's not like kissing our butts, right? We just hear that internally as a no, or we've just been taught that everything that's an objection means we need to convince someone, right, of why we're the right person, which I think is, and I mean this not to trample on other people's teaching, but I think that is a horrible way to sell because first, why would we ever want to convince someone of something that they don't actually want, right? It's more to help someone get clear on what it is they actually want. But I think as soon as we get into, I need to overcome an objection by convincing you of something, we get into trampoline mode and not listening mode. And generally speaking, that either doesn't create a great connection and an understanding of how we can best support someone and create a great client, and or it creates a situation where you might book the client, but then they're really looking to you to be the holder of the keys to all. It's sort of like someone's giving you all their power and they're expecting you to always take all the power and come up with all of the answers and solutions. And I think that can create for not the healthiest dynamic for most of us, given what most of us are selling is some sort of service and support, at least in this group. Let me know if that's making sense there. But the big thing here, and what I was reflecting to this client, and there were two pieces, and I said this with love, but I was like, I think you're taking this really personally and you're making this personal. And there's nothing here that is personal at all. I think what's happening is you're hearing, right? Your insecurities are being triggered. I happen to know these clients well, right? And so for one client, they have some stuff that comes up around being good enough. And for another client, they just have some stuff that comes up around control, as most of us do as humans, right? This again is why coaching is valuable. This isn't to say these are things that you shouldn't have. Most of us have some combination of these things, especially if we're entrepreneurs. But because of that, what they were hearing was coming through that lens. And so they were hearing things of, I don't want this, you're not good enough, this offer isn't good enough. Or they were hearing, all the things that were going to be out of their control, right? They were just really wanting to create control. And sometimes creating control is, I'm just going to shut this down and make this a no, instead of really sit in that discomfort of sitting with someone else in their discomfort of not knowing what they want and supporting them through that process. And so that was the first thing I had to reflect, and that I would reflect to you, and that I would really start to pay attention to, especially with bigger offers, high ticket offers, is, and again, not that this doesn't come up with low ticket offers, I just think with high ticket offers, we are usually more connected to the person we're speaking to, so it is easier to take it personally, right? I sell a $99 sales course. I'm sure if I was having a big launch, I could make it more personal, but I'm not talking to anybody one-on-one who buys that to hear their thought process, hear what's going on with them. So it's easier for me to not to take any of that personally, is really what I mean here. When you're having sales conversations, when you're following up, when you're speaking one-on-one with someone, it's just so much easier to take that personally and to have it trigger your personal stuff. And so what I would just remember with all sales, and again, we're just talking about high ticket sales here because it comes up more, but this is for all sales, is really to remember it is not personal. Business really and truly isn't personal, even if it feels personal to us. And generally speaking, this is something I like to remember, it comes from my acting days, I'll explain an example there, but if someone's having a call with you, if someone's looking at your sales page, they're already interested in what you have to offer, right? They already have a confirmation bias towards what it is you have to offer. They're trying to figure out for themselves if this is the right fit. Usually it's personal for them, not for you. But what happens and where the disconnect happens is we hear stuff that triggers our personal stuff, again, which is normal because we're human. But we have to be so mindful, because as soon as we make it personal about us, we are not listening to the person in front of us. We're not listening to what they really need to hear to be able to make that decision, to get that clarity they need. Let me know if this is if this is landing, if this is making sense. And so again, this isn't to say you don't get to be personal or bring your personality into business. But when I think about, I have a 92 to 93% sales call closing rate right now on sales calls, give or take. I haven't calculated it recently, but that's what it was the last time. Most of the time when someone gets on the call with me, they want to hire me, right? And the reason for that, or one of the reasons for that, is I also don't take it personally at all what comes up for someone in that sales process. I just see it as so normal and as something for me to support someone with. I also don't see it personal, take it personally if someone doesn't want to work with me. Telling this to someone recently, I was like, I'm sharing that so you can see I know what I'm talking about with sales and there's things to come to. But if someone said no to me and that dropped my conversion rate, I wouldn't take that personally or make myself wrong. I'd be like, well, that's great. We got clear that this wasn't the right fit and someone came to a clear decision. And that makes it so much easier than for me to actually have that, to close those clients, right? To bring in clients who are a great fit, but to help someone make those decisions because I'm not making it about me, right? I'm not taking things on that are personal. Because as soon as we make it personal, right, and someone has an objection and they have questions, or they tell you why they think something is expensive, or they tell you all the reasons they think, they want something different in an offer, or whatever, they're not ready. Now's not the right time. They're talking to this other person who does X, Y, and Z, right? As soon as we take any of that and make it about us not being good enough, or fill in the blank, whatever our personal stuff is, right? Control, safety, wanting to be liked, right? What are some of the common ones there? Instead of, again, responding to what the person is actually saying, which is, I am actually trying to tell you, it's kind of a cry for help, right? This is me saying, I'm trying to figure out if this is right for me, and I'm trying to figure out how to make this work for me. I'm trying to figure out for myself how I can feel safer making this next step. I'm letting you know the things I need. I just have a hard time articulating it, right? Instead of being able to see that and to be able to have the conversation that someone is essentially asking us to have, just maybe doesn't have the tools to know what to ask for, because they're in their stuff, and they should be, because they're in the potential client's seat, right? We make it about our stuff and trying to fix and solve our stuff and soothe our stuff. And again, that's when we have the disconnect and we end up responding, we're not asking questions, in a way that pushes people away instead of draws them in and helps them to see how we can support them. I keep my chairs rolling, y'all. What I use as from an example from my acting days that I always just think about, and I think can just be a helpful way to think about this, is when I was acting, and even if you know nothing about acting, this will make sense here. When I was acting and you would go to audition, you would have a casting director. My husband has an audition on Thursday. We were just talking about this. And you would, perform your audition. And then sometimes you would get what's called a redirect, and a casting director would, you did the scene, they're like, great, could you do this again, but, a little bit bigger? Or like, actually, here's something you didn't know that happened in the scene before. You actually can't find your child, or you just actually got broken up with, or whatever the thing is. Can you do this scene again now? No, like with that in mind, or can you do this a little bit more scared, right? They'd give you some sort of redirect. And what would happen for a lot of actors is they would hear that and they would make it personal, and it would reconfirm one of their triggers, one of their doubts, one of their fears. I'm not a good actor. Oh my gosh, I'm horrible at comedy. Oh my gosh, I'm horrible at drama. Oh my gosh, they don't like me. Oh my gosh, I didn't do it right the first time, right? Whatever their personal stuff was, it would be very easy for, as an actor, to take that on and make it really personal. And then instead of hearing that redirect, right, and doing the scene again in a way that the casting director wanted that would help you book the job, they'd be up in their head. They probably wouldn't really be listening. Maybe they try it again, but it would probably come from the energy of like, I suck, I'm not good enough, right? And they wouldn't book the part, and then that would reinforce the story, right, that casting director didn't like them, that they're not good enough, right? And this would be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas what is actually true, and I've like still rolling, y'all. And what I learned, because I helped cast a couple projects, but also just, I was in 12 indie films, I was in 12 commercials, right? What I learned over time is casting directors were rooting for you, right? When you walked in the door, they hoped that you were the person that was going to make their job easier and that you were going to fill the role for them. They could be done with their job, right? You were going to book the part. And so when they gave you a redirect, and a redirect is no different than an objection, right? It's I want this, we want to hire you, but insert, could you do it a different way? But we haven't seen yet what we need, right? That's pretty much the same thing as an objection. An objection is, I'm considering hiring you, but I have this fear, I have this concern, I need to know this thing, I have this question, right? Same thing. when, as an actor, you could start to see casting directors, and this is analogous to business, potential clients are rooting for you, right? When a potential client gets on a call with you, they're hoping you're the person that's going to solve their problem. They're hoping your product, your program, your service is the solution for them. When you go into an audition, a casting director is rooting for you. And if you're not exactly the thing that they thought of that they needed, right, or they've got some stuff going on, it's personal for them, right? When they're asking, when a casting director is giving a redirect, it's because they're rooting for you. It's because they're considering you. It's because they think you could be the one. They just need to see something different. And sometimes it's because they think you're so great. They're thinking about the next movie or the next project or the next scene. They want to see, can you do even more than they gave you in the audition? Like, there's so many reasons a casting director will do that. It's the same for a potential client. But when you can start to see that and see it's not personal, and generally speaking, when casting director is giving a redirect or when a client has an objection, it is generally because they are actually considering working with you. I think that can really help get you out of, what does this mean that's bad about me, as opposed to, what does this mean about this potential client and what they need to know or see or believe or hear to help confirm that this inkling that they might want to move forward with me actually is right for them, or will feel good, or will give them all the information they need. And so I was sharing this with one of my clients, and it just really clicked for them. And it just really helped them to see, oh, every time I hear an objection, every time I hear someone come back with something, I take it personally, I make it mean, basically I suck. And as opposed to when I can hear that is, oh, this is actually an indication a client's really, really interested in considering hiring me, that changes everything, right? Because then, going back to the acting example, if you know that, then you want to listen to what that redirect is, and you want to nail that next redirect, and you're like, oh, I'm in for this. Like, they are really considering me, right? You up your chances of winning the part. With a client, when you no longer make it mean something personal and that you suck, right, and either not respond or get defensive or not answer their question, instead, when you're like, oh, they're asking these things, they're saying these things because they're really considering working with me, right? That changes everything. Then you want to drop in and listen. Then you're like, what are they actually asking? What do they need to hear? What do they need to know? What can I share with them? Is this the right fit, right? It changes the entire energetic dynamic, right? Because instead of self-defeated and defensive and like, how do I self-protect, or how do I control this, or I suck, right? We become more open, we're more confident, but it also literally will change what you hear and how you respond, and how you respond in your follow-ups. Alyssa says, oh yeah, you're on. Somehow didn't get the email for the live today, so went looking. Oh, that is good to know, Alyssa. I will check, because I know you're on I know your email address. So I will check that. We're in team transitions. Y'all, this is a side note. I've had a team member for, I think, 5 years. She's finally graduated onto, not bigger, better things. Being on my team wasn't great, but she was a VA for a long time, and she started a different business that she's kind of graduating into. So we're transitioning her out. So we do have some transitions with the email. So that is good for me to know, because that means we might have just had something in the onboarding transition there that didn't work. So thank you, Alyssa, for letting me know. Anybody else, if you didn't get the email, let me know. I will check and see what happened there. This is very good information. So thank you. Going back to what we were talking about, but that is helpful information. And I'll get a sip of water. But I think that's just the first thing there. I think if you get nothing else from this conversation, I'm going to talk through something else that I think is really helpful to understand when it comes to closing high ticket sales. Or deals. I really think this is one thing here. When you can see it as not personal, and again, I just really want us to help understand this. When you can see when someone has an objection, when someone has a question, when someone is, I always think, obviously, it's great when someone's a yes on a call, but honestly, like I've just been doing this almost 9 years now. March will be 9 years. I've been fully booked with 20 to 25 one-on-one clients for the last, I think it's 6 years now, give or take a couple of months. I have the most wonderful clients. I have clients who've worked with me for 4 years, 5 years at this point, like in a row. I adore my clients. I like pinch myself. I have the best clients for all of my incredible clients. Some of them have been yeses on a call, and some of them have had, 5, 6, however many back and forths and so many questions. And because, and this is the other piece of the conversation, because they simply have a different decision-making process. They have a different buying persona, and they have different stuff they're coming to the table with, right? It's very different if you've never been burned by the industry before, or if you're coming in with a lot of financial resources, or you've made a lot of investments before. I know me personally, I'm a very quick decision maker overall. That's my personality. I mean, I made the decision to literally leave my life in New York City, sell my apartment, move to New York City, start over, change my career in, I mean, I came here on a trip, made the decision, and then within 2 weeks later, I had put in my notice at my job and sold my car. I'm a very quick decision maker, to the point that it's not always beneficial, right? I have to check myself and put checks and balances in, because if I'm not mindful, I can be a little bit too almost like impulsive, spontaneous, right? That's one way of making decisions. I have other clients and I have good friends and I know other people who also make great decisions and are great business owners who are very methodical and like to do lots of research and like to understand every nuance and little thing, right? Those are just two different, and I can be that person with certain purchases, right? Those are just two different ways of making decisions, and there's multiple different decision making processes, but I think this is important to understand as well, and this is what I was reflecting to my client also, because again, when we're looking at high ticket sales, if we just assume when someone has a question, when someone has an objection, when someone sends an email, this is where I was going with this, where they have a bunch of questions or they're not immediately agreeing to what we want, it is, if we're taking it personally, it is just so easy to make it about ourselves, to get defensive, to write them off, to think they don't want to work with us. And that changes the way you respond or don't respond, as opposed to when we know that it's not personal, when someone's responding, that means they're actually interested in working with you, and that, you know, people have these different decision-making ways of making decision. It can also really create a beautiful experience for someone, where that is part of what makes them feel good moving forward, because you're holding them in a way somebody else wouldn't, because they are taking it personally. I know for me, I have a couple people who come to mind who I think about when we first started working together. They sent me a ton of questions, and in my mind, it's never, oh my gosh, they hate me, they think I suck, or like, oh my gosh, they're going to be a horrible client because they have all these questions. It's, I actually think, oh great, this is going to be a great client. Look at how many questions they have. Look at how interested they are. This is just their decision-making process. They're fact finders. They're researchers, right? This is what they need to feel good moving forward. And I just get really excited by that, because that also just shows me what kind of a client they're going to be. And I get equally excited by that as someone who knows on a call, because, you know, they synthesize information differently. Maybe they've researched my website or they've consumed my content. They already know they want to hire me. Equally excited about both, and both I've seen are just equally great clients, and both can be equally interested and love working with you. And I think when we can understand that, again, we stop sabotaging, we stop pushing away really great clients. I think sometimes we think that the secret to closing, you know, if I think about my client who has a multi-six-figure deal that they're working through, yes, of course, they need to have good messaging. They need to have the kind of marketing networking that got them through the door. Of course, they need to have an excellent offer for that to even be something they can, right? We can't just slap a multi-six-figure price tag onto an offer. Of course, these things are all true. And when I look at what is getting them into these rooms and what is allowing them to facilitate these conversations and to move someone through these conversations, first and foremost, a deal like that usually isn't decided in one meeting, right? That is, there's a series of meetings there. My coach has sold one of her companies, and I don't know all the ins and outs, but I'm pretty sure there were multiple conversations, right? That usually happens with a larger deal, with a larger offer. And what I really see, and what I've coached this client around quite a bit, is the level of their ability and their confidence and their groundedness and their ability to lean back within their offer and to allow space for, in this case, they're selling to a company, but for the company or for the decision maker to have the decision process they need to have the questions they need to have the concerns they need to have the objections they need to, and to hold and guide someone through that is just at such a larger level than I think than people who are you know, taking it really personally when someone doesn't want to buy a lower ticket or off it. And that is the difference, right? We think, again, it's like this magic sentence on our bio on Instagram, and I'm teasing a little bit, but I think sometimes we get really wrapped around the axle of these things that we think are, that's why people aren't hiring or buying. And I think we sometimes forget, especially once you're already in conversation with someone, that when we're selling high ticket, so much of it comes down to these elements, and these are a little bit less tangible, right? This is more the mindset and the energy, but in that way, if we can really see how that then also directs and changes the actual strategy, because for both of the client examples I was giving here, what I then coached them through and what changed was then the practical, tactical response in terms of the follow-up was very, very different when we took out making it personal, and when we were able to look at, oh, this is someone's decision-making process. How do we support their decision-making process? I feel like a broken record, and I say this all the time, but I really see sales as helping someone get clear, on the decision they want to make and the right decision for them, and making them or helping them, supporting them to make the decision to move towards what is right for them, right? It's those components. And so when we can really see that and we follow up in a different way, or we pitch in a different way, or we hold the conversation around an objection with that in mind, then the practical, tactical, the actual strategy and approach changes quite a bit. Hopefully that makes sense. But if you have questions, let me know. And similarly, like just using that acting example, because I think it's just helpful for us to hear this in things outside of business. When I look at some of the acting jobs I booked, it's not like I didn't get direction ever. It's not like I came in and every job I booked, I had one take and they were like, that's you. Sometimes I did, right? Sometimes I booked, remember one commercial, I was a crazy screaming bride. It was a very fun job. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I went in, I was confident, I like executed, I nailed, I did it differently than everybody else. Like I knew that job was mine before even auditioning, right? I didn't have a reject. I have other jobs. I booked a movie that shot in South Africa for 7 weeks, and I think I had multiple callbacks, right? Which is like having multiple follow-ups and calls. And I believe I had some multiple directions on that one. And that was a great job and a great role. And if I hadn't seen that as, oh, these are just two different jobs, right? Two different roles, two different sets of casting directors and producers and directors with different needs, right? Different levels of commitment, but also different decision-making processes. And also I was bringing something different. If I hadn't seen that and I had seen, an ask for another take for the film, for example, as a sign that they hated me, which if we think about it, makes no logical sense. Why would anybody ask a question, have you do another take of the audition, reach out to you if they're a potential client for information, feedback, to ask questions if they weren't considering you or interested in you, right? Like we zoom out, we can see how that makes complete sense. But then that changed how willing I was and how I committed to that, right? Which ultimately got me those jobs. I can also see when I started acting, I remember one audition in general, and they kept me in the room for half an hour, which now looking back means I was probably one of the few people up for that job. And they really wanted me to be, I don't know, like super perky, let's just say. It was a doesn't even matter what it was. And they gave me a lot of redirect, and they kept having me want to try different ways. Now looking back, I see they really, really wanted to hire me, and I was probably really close to getting it. But I remember halfway through that audition with all that feedback, I thought the casting director was a bitch and hated me and was picking on me. I was probably 22, 3 at the time, right? I didn't have the tools I did now. I didn't have the tools I did years into acting. And I really think I got in my own head. And I think because of that, it really affected the way I was taking that direction. I was probably getting a little defeated. I was probably getting a little defensive. And I'm sure I did an okay job, but I didn't book that job. And sure, there could be multiple factors there, but I think a lot of it was I took it really personally. And I didn't see those objections, that feedback as, we actually want to work with you. I saw it as, we don't like you, we don't want to work with you. And that's my personal, has always been historically my personal stuff. And so again, I think it's just so important for us to, this is where, coaching and where seeing that business is, yes, it's the strategy, yes, it's looking at the data, yes, it's the execution and the action, yes, it's the clarity on what we're selling, our messaging and our business model. And there's such a component here in terms of what we personally bring to the table, what our triggers are, the lens we're seeing things through, and how having sometimes that outside perspective can be so beneficial, because otherwise I thought I was right. Like what we think, we fight for our stories and our limitations. And when we make something personal, we will really fight for that and see that as true, because that's how we're wired. And that is a safety survival mechanism. And it's really tough for us to see the forest for the trees until someone else can say, actually, love you, but that's kind of your stuff. And your stuff is getting projected in here. And if we take that stuff out, what is actually true in this situation? And so I would offer for all of you, especially if you're selling higher ticket and you're in those dynamics, even if you're not working with a coach, if you're feeling yourself get activated in a sales process, that's usually a really great sign that you're taking it personal or that it's not a good fit, right? And so what I would check in with here is this someone who's a good fit? If it's someone who's a good fit, is it possible that I'm being triggered? Is it possible I'm getting activated? Is it possible that there's something here I'm taking on and making personal? If so, if I took that out of the picture, if I put someone else in this situation, right? If I could just look at this, like, could I get myself to a bit more neutrality and look at this? What is actually true here? What are they actually asking me? How would I respond? I think can be a really beneficial a beneficial thing here. And then the other thing, and just to kind of, I said I wanted to land the plane on this a little bit. I think the other thing that can just be really helpful if you're in this situation, again, whether you're working with a coach or not, or to bring to your coach, and I need to get one of those like mats for my chair, y'all. I'm like I have not rolled this much in a long time. So don't mind me as I readjust here so I don't roll off the screen from my rolling chair. Where's it going? Oh, I wanted to land the plane on this a little bit. So whether you're working with a coach or not, or you want to bring this to a coach, I think this is something that can be helpful to understand as well, is really starting to think about there simply are different buyer personas, and we all have different ways we process information and make decisions. I think about this a lot with my husband. My husband's highly intelligent. He's very emotionally intelligent. He's also, he doesn't know his IQ, but he's very, very intelligent. And I say that to say, I think sometimes we hear processing to mean like how smart or not smart you are. I'm also highly intelligent. I have a borderline genius level IQ. Like I know I'm a smart person. We process and synthesize information very differently, and we make decisions very differently. And that has to do with lots of factors. Part of this is helpful for everyone to know. Part of that has to do with your family systems and how you were raised, and the communication styles in your family. There's a lot of reasons for that. But so we synthesize information and we make decisions very differently. And that's so important for me to know, because I think otherwise, right, we would get into conflict, because I just want to, like, I can see a list, I can synthesize the information, I tend to process quite quickly, make decisions quite quickly. He's more of a researcher, a fact finder, likes to like check the different facets of something before making that decision. Both ways are right. Both ways are great. In fact, they make for a really great partnership, right? Because if I'm too much on my way, right, that can also lead into some really poor decisions sometimes. If he's too much in his way, right, that could lead to we will never make a decision on something and move forward on something, right? You can see the pros to cons, and so together that makes for a really great marriage, a really great partnership. But it's also important for both of us to know we do come at processing information and making decisions differently, so that we don't get frustrated with one another, or we don't think someone isn't paying attention, or so that we know how to support the other person. And the reason I'm bringing that here is it's similar with when you're supporting a client. I think the more you can understand that everybody you speak to is not going to process information the same way you do, and everybody is not going to make decisions the same way you do. And there are multiple combinations, and those can even change based on the type of decision, right? Sometimes I do become a fact finder. Sometimes I do become a researcher. Sometimes I do drag my heels on a decision, right? There are different situations where that could be the case. Not usually, but most of us are generally one more than the other. Some of us really like to wait till the last minute, just need a little bit of that pressure. Some of us are really impulsive, right? There's all these different factors that come into place. But the more you can understand that there is not one way people synthesize information and make decisions, and that not everybody is going to process the same way, make decisions the same way as you, and that doesn't mean that they're not going to be a great client, or that they are not a good fit, or that they're toxic, or whatever the information. In fact, sometimes that difference can make for a really great partnership. I think about that with team even, right? I don't want someone who's exactly like me. I have many clients who process like me, and that can be great, but it really can make for that really great, because you can help see things from a different lens, balance things out a little bit. But I think the more you can then also start to think about, the more you can business is understanding people, marketing is understanding people, sales is understanding people. It's paying attention and listening. It's not rocket science. Everybody here understands people. I think this makes it sound like you have to have some like fancy psychology degree. That can help, not help, but it's really starting to understand people, which just asks us to put our stuff to the side for a moment, right? To not make it personal and just be able to drop in and listen and pay attention. People will tell you how they process. People will tell you how they make decisions. People will tell you what they need. But if we can pay attention to that, and again, take our personal stuff out and see everyone's going to be a little bit different, and just try to understand in these conversations, especially with higher ticket offers, how does someone process information? What do they actually need to be able to process this? What do they actually need to be able to make a decision? What is going to support them to make that decision? The easier sales get, and the easier it is. Like, that's probably, yes, I'm a great coach. I think I'm a great coach. I think I'm a great sales, but it's not like I have some magical sales script that is like so unique and different, and that's why I have a 92 to 93% sales call closing rate. I think what I'm excellent at is I'm an excellent coach. I know how to listen to people, right? I know how to pay attention to people. I know how to understand the way they process and synthesize information and make decisions, and to support them through that. I'm really great at helping someone like holding what they want versus what I want for them, right? And helping them move towards that, even if that means not working with me. That's the big difference. But that skill set just comes from what we're talking about here. Can you make it not personal? And can you see people have different ways they process, synthesize information, and make decisions? And the more you can pay attention to that and see, great, so what does someone need to know or hear or understand? How can I support them through that? The easier it becomes to support clients through that sales decision. Oh, I want to see what Kate says. Kate says, same for us. I'm the one that makes decisions quickly, and hubby takes much longer, and he has to look at every fact. And I appreciate it so much, but it drove me crazy to begin with. I was 18 though, so I give myself some grace. It really does make for a great partnership 24 years on. 24 years on, I think I said this on Instagram, maybe where you posted that, but just have to say congratulations, Kate. That is a big, big deal. And yes, I think such a great thing to see. It probably did feel very different 24 years ago when you were 18, and just such a great example there of what a great partnership it can make for and how common that is. And I'm sure your hubs is super smart, right? Like it has nothing to do with that. And I'm sure when you suggest something that you've already made a decision on, it doesn't mean that he's not interested in it or he doesn't want it or he doesn't want to move forward with it. But the more you can understand, he has a different way to synthesize information and what he needs to feel good moving forward, right? Probably the more harmony, ease that you can have as a partnership. And it's the same with sales. I think it's actually maybe a good example. We moved to Dumbo, New York City. It's one of my two dream neighborhoods, West Village, where I first lived in New York City, and Dumbo. We moved here during COVID. And at the time, my husband had lived in Manhattan for something like 15 years, 17 years. And it's not that he was open to it, it's just like that was such a big decision. And we looked at a place, like it was just a lot for him to process. And so if it were up to him, right, we would just never move because that's just too much to synthesize and process. Not because he didn't want to, but because of what we're talking about here, just a different processing and a different way of making decision. Meanwhile, I had already found an apartment and moved in before we even came to look over here, right? Like I had made the decision. Like we walked into this building, we looked at a couple places, like I made the decision walking into the building. That doesn't make me right and him wrong, or him wrong and me right. But it is helpful to see that if I'm going to enroll him in my decision, right? If I know that this is something he actually also wants, if I just see him having a question mark about it or having some doubts or saying like, but what about this? Or like, what about this? If I take that personally, or if I take that to mean, oh, I thought you wanted to do this and you don't, we could see how that could create a lot of conflict, or how I could get defensive, or how I could want to argue, or how I could make a case for what I want, as opposed to seeing, oh, you said that you were interested in this as well. I know I am someone who will walk in and make a decision, even if it doesn't make sense and we can't afford this, because we couldn't afford this at the time, right? It was a 1 hour decision-making process for me. You need something different. You need more information. You need me to help lay some things out for you. You need to see a couple of things. You need to sit on this, right? And one is not better than the other. That was probably good for us, so we didn't make an impulsive decision. But it also helped me to not respond knowing that, because I didn't get defensive. I didn't argue. I didn't take it personally. I didn't make that mean, you hate this idea, you hate this place, right? All of these things. And so we were able to come to a decision together. That's what we're doing in sales. And I think, again, it's just so important to see one is not better than the other. And one does not indicate a better client than the other. And it is so normal, but it is so easy, again, because we are all human, to take things personally. I think if I didn't know that about myself, that would have been a very easy thing, just using the apartment example, right, to take personally or to make a big thing, as opposed to the more we can understand this and not make it personal, and then to see, oh, instead, what does this person need for their way they synthesize information and process and make decisions, the easier it gets across the board. The other thing I think is maybe the last nugget I'll put on here, and then let me know if you all have any questions, that I will share is, and I say this as well because I was sharing this with another client. I have a couple notes here that I'll share. If the person you're speaking to in a sales conversation has been burned before, they've had a bad experience. We see this outside of business, right? If you're dating and someone has had a shitty relationship in the past, or they've been cheated on, or they have some trauma with relationships. So in business, with whatever it is you're selling, right? Trauma with a capital T or lowercase t, if someone's had a bad experience, or as a person, if they are someone who's maybe got more of an anxious attachment style or an avoidant attachment style, right? These different personality types, which don't only have to do with the way they process information and make decisions, but also have to do with how someone is going to feel safer making a decision and being supported, and most of us are doing some kind of support. I think, again, it's not for us all, like psychoanalyst, most of us aren't therapists. For those of you who are therapists, I don't even know that that's your job until you're working with a client. But I do think it's helpful for us to understand, again, oftentimes, if that's the case, people will exhibit that in the buying process, in the sales process. And the more you can see that as this is not personal, right? If someone has been burned in the past, people are going to, sometimes they'll have fear and they'll have a lot of objections. Sometimes they're going to subconsciously test you. And sometimes, depending on their personality type, they might ghost you and be avoidant for a little bit. And the more we can see, oh, this isn't personal, this is, they told me they got burned in the past, they told me X, Y, and Z, or they told me they're really scared, or they told me, when they freak out, they have they're not sure, they're really overwhelmed by this decision. We can start to see these behaviors as normal. And again, doesn't mean you have to say that means that's the person you want to work with, or that's a great client. Maybe that's not behavior that makes sense for the program you have. But I think these are things we can, again, help us to not take things on as personally, to screen for, is this someone who's ready to work with you, right? These are, if someone is, let's say, really avoidant or doesn't take personal responsibility, maybe considering, depending on your work, maybe that isn't the right person to move forward with. But then you can be in your power to reflect that, or to reflect, hey, I'm noticing X, Y, and Z is coming up. I wonder if it could be more about, what you mentioned, or reflecting what is actually going on, as opposed to, again, when we take things personally, it is just so easy to take that to mean they're ghosting me, they don't like me, they're a jerk, they're an a-hole. This always happens to me. People don't want high ticket. People always say they want to wait forever. Whatever the thing is we tend to do when we get defensive or we take things on personally, that is very unhelpful and has us give our power away to outside forces, as opposed to, generally speaking, what people do makes sense if we're paying attention. That doesn't mean you have to condone it, that doesn't mean you have to like it, that doesn't mean you have to take them on as a client, but it generally will make sense, and it's generally not personal. I would say 95% of stuff, especially when it's in a sales conversation and they haven't even been in your program yet, generally speaking, it's not personal. It's almost always about what's going on for the person in front of you. And again, not everybody's job to psychoanalyze or to solve that or to heal that or to fix that or to even take that on as a client. But I think the more you can see that, the more you can separate out what you might take on as personal, and to see this as, it's like the mob quote from one of the movies. It's not personal, it's strictly business. The more you can see it as business and someone just being in their trigger or in their stuff or in their trauma response or in their fear response, and then you can make a decision accordingly. Are they a fit or not, or know how to respond accordingly? And so I think, again, that can just be a really helpful frame, and the more you pay attention to this, the more you will notice that. And I guess it's the last. I'm like Irish goodbye in this, because I keep got one more last thing to say, but let me see what Kate says. Kate says, another example of how coaching can support all areas of life and help you to be more open to how other people work so you can better support them. Amen. I know you are like me, and we are all about coaching forever. But yes, it is just such a great example of the benefits, the never-ending benefits of coaching. Kate, you'll appreciate this. I just renewed with my coach again. We're on 6.5 years now, 7 years. I've lost track. And I know sometimes people ask me, they're like, why do you still work with a coach? And it's this sort of thing where I think it's just, we just can't see the forest for the trees. I was saying this at the beginning of the live, I don't think you were on. I can't put my mascara on in the dark. I can't see the spinach in my own teeth. I'm just always amazed at how beneficial it is to have someone help you see what you can't see for yourself, whether it's in this case or in different ways, and how the personal is always connected to business. The idea that we think they are separate, to me, is fascinating, considering we are humans running businesses serving other humans. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, Kate, but yes to that. Last thing I'll just share here with kind of the conversation we're having here, and removing the personal for yourself so you can focus on the person in front of you and what's personal for them in these sales conversations, especially with higher ticket sales and offers. Again, for what we were saying, this is still present with lower ticket offers. We just generally can find ourselves in situations where it's easier to get more enmeshed with high ticket, because we're having more of those one-on-one conversations or one-to-many conversations where it's easier for us to take things on that we want to create that separation. And the other thing I just always like to remember, and I remind my clients of, is, generally speaking, what someone has as an objection, what someone has as a concern, what someone has as a question, the reason someone tells you they want to work with you but can't is generally the reason they need your support. And the more we can see that, the easier it is for us not to unintentionally co-sign someone's story or unintentionally buy into or get enrolled by their limitations, and to, again, not take things personally and to see the forest for the trees and to see, oh, of course this makes sense. Like, again, human behavior, like, things just always make sense. It doesn't mean that we like them, but human behavior pretty much always makes sense. And so then we can see, oh, it makes complete sense that you're having this response here, because you're telling me you're having a hard time showing up in your business, and you are telling me, I'm just using this as a random example that's coming to mind, and you're telling me you're having a hard time being consistent, and you're kind of stop and starting, and these different things are coming up for you, and now this behavior is showing up in the decision-making process. Of course, because this is your pattern, and I'm sure if we unpack this, we could see where this is coming from, but this is your pattern, and this is also the very reason you need support. So of course that's also showing up in your objection or in your question mark, right? Like, of course that's happening. So again, I think the more we can see that, the more you can give yourself grace and not make it personal. But I think just the easier it is to help someone make that decision, to spot those patterns, to be able to move forward. Okay, just seeing if there's any other questions, reflections. I don't think so. If y'all let me know, Kate, I don't know if you got the email for this. I'm going to check the email later, but let me know if our emails are working, because that's something that we will check. But we will have a live stream again next week as well, just to say. So we have 2 more live streams before the end of the year, as we're getting those emails sorted out. But I hope this was valuable for you all in terms of what you need to make more 5-figure deals, or to close more 5-figure deals. I think the biggest thing here to see is for how personal our businesses are to us. The more we can take out the personal, and that doesn't mean the personalization, right? But more making things personal, and instead be really curious about the human in front of us and what's personal for them. And to remember, everybody has different processing, synthesizing, decision making, buying making, habits, patterns, histories. And if we're paying attention, that all makes sense when we're paying attention. One is not better or worse than another, but the more we can see that and not expect people to be like us, or when someone does something where we're like, well, I would never do that, or if I did that, that would mean X, Y, and Z. The less we can do that, and the more we can let each person be who they are and be curious about them, to support them through their buying decision, and to see if someone's engaging with you, that generally means they're interested, right? And to support them and facilitate that, the easier it is to book and to close more of those high ticket clients. And those high ticket clients who are going to be a great fit, because the more you can then also pay attention to and notice, right? So we're not just trying to close a deal or close a client. I almost didn't want to title this live stream that way, because it's not about closing deals. It's about booking the right fit clients, right? Booking people who are going to be a right fit for your service, your program, your offer. The more you can also notice where someone who maybe says yes right away, that actually maybe isn't the right fit client, because you slow down long enough to ask them the questions you need to, or where you can see, because of the way maybe someone is making a decision or some of the things they're bringing up, that, oh, isn't this interesting? I actually don't think this is a great fit for my offer. Let's help them make a different decision. And I think that can be just as important, if not more important. Taking on clients who are a wrong fit is we've all been there, we've all done it, but it can be incredibly draining to any business owner. So I would take this from that way as well. Like, the goal is not how do you close every deal. The goal is not how do you have 100% sales rate. If I ever have 100% sales call closing rate, I don't know. At a certain point, I guess, if you have a wait list, like, there's certain factors where that would be okay, but I still, I would always want to make sure we have some discernment happening. So I would just see the goal is not that. The goal is having discernment for yourself, not taking it personal, and being able to help the person in front of you have the right kind of discernment, so that you're creating those great partnerships, whatever it is you happen to offer. Kate says, so true. Love how you broken this down. I didn't get the email. Thank you for telling me, Kate. All right, y'all. Well, that's probably why we'd have more of you live. Something is off with our email, so we will check that with our team transition. That's so helpful. So thank you for letting me know. That's super, super helpful. Okay, so to wrap this up, good to know in the email, but I hope that's helpful for this conversation. If you have questions, leave them for me below. Again, we are booking for, I think we still will have one spot in January, if not for February, and I will open up an intensive for January. So if you are interested in potentially working together, having my support to help you, yes, with sales conversations, but also to take the personal out, to learn how to think like a CEO, to operate your business like a CEO, to step into that role as a CEO, which is quite different than most of the roles we've all had in our lives and to implement the strategy that actually works to bring in consistent clients and to make those consistent 10K to 100K months. I would love to connect with you. Again, my spots have been filling up quite quickly, and I don't know how many we're going to have open in the new year. So please book a call sooner rather than later, even if you're just curious. These are very low-key calls. They are not pressurized at all, but I would love to connect with you and chat about that so we can see when we have a spot open up for you. All right, I love you all so much. Thank you for being here and showing up even without the email. I appreciate you so much. I'll be back next week with another conversation for y'all. Bye.